Hi and welcome. Today I have a piece from my mini ring journal, and I have three different pieces. One's going to be the background, and I have two circles that I'm going to put on them, as well as do the background of the main surface. I'm starting with the larger ring, and I'm adding some distress oxide in the color Kitsch Flamingo, and I'm going to be using that stencil to add some sparkle texture paste, and that's the reason I'm doing this piece first, to give that more time to dry. And the thing with the sparkle texture paste, it is a translucent, other than the sparkle that's in it. You can see some gold flecks, and it's translucent, so you'll see the pink through it. And I'm going to be adding some more, a different color of distress ink on top of the pink, but where the texture paste is, it won't adhere. So it might sit on top and I wipe it off, but it pretty much will stay pink through the texture paste, if that makes sense. You'll see as I go along. But so I get that done and I set that aside to dry, and I'm going to start working on the smaller circle. And I'm taking a stamp from Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous, and I think it's called Grunged, something like that. I'll have it listed in the description, but I'm using my Versamark stamp pad and adding this grungy grid stamp, and I'm going to use some Kitsch Flamingo Distress Glaze. Just put it on, and then I'll put the excess back in the little container. And I always toss that sheet because you never get it all off. And then I'm going to emboss it with my heat tool. So it cools really quick, and I'm going to do a little bit of stamping on it before I add a second color. And this is a stamp from Rubber Dance. It's one of my favorite number stamps, and so I'm just going to add some of that in the lower section. You end up not hardly even seeing, you might see a tiny bit of it, but that's okay. So you could definitely skip that step if you didn't have a stamp you liked. And then I'm taking some spiced marmalade, and I'm going to add that, and it won't adhere to the distress glaze, and so it just is going on the background. And I'm taking some I think I'm using scorched timber here. Yeah, it's pretty dark. And although that doesn't look like the right, I end up using scorched timber. I might have used vintage photo to begin with, but I do end up with scorched timber around the edges just because it just needed to be a little bit darker, I felt. And then I'm going to do a little bit of stamping with crackling campfire. And this is a stamp from the field notes. And I spritz it with a little bit of water to give it kind of a watercolor effect. And it just kind of gives a soft stamping on top of it. Again, I do a lot of things on top of this circle, so it's not like you're gonna see the big picture like you're seeing it now. You're just gonna see little bits and pieces of it from behind. And so I'm taking my pieces that I'm going to collage and just adding a little bit of vintage photo. That's what it was, vintage photo. I do go over the circle again with some scorched timber, I'm fairly certain. Vintage photos usually my go-to for distressing the edges, but sometimes I think it needs to stand out a little more, and so I'll grab scorched timber. So I'm just picking my things that I want on, and I want to label that little, or stamp that little label, but I don't want to ink the whole pad, so I'm just covering it up. You can use masking tape. I've used masking tape, but I had some post-it notes handy, so I just kind of covered it up and stamping it on that little tag or label. And then I have this butterfly. I have two butterflies I'm using today. Both are is just some, I think, file folders that I bought. And they had really cute butterflies on them, so I cut them out. I actually glued them to some black cardstock and cut them out. So now I'm still waiting on my large circle to dry, and so I'm taking my background and I'm adding some of the crackling campfire through this diamond pattern. Is it Harlequin? Maybe. And so I'm doing crackling campfire over the whole thing through the stencil, and then I'm going to offset the stencil once I clean it off there. Now often I would take that and press it into my envelope journal so I don't waste that ink, but I must not have thought about that at the time. And so I offset it so it's covering up the orange, and I'm gonna spray some Kitsch Flamingo through the stencil, and I moved those circles away just so they didn't get any over spray, because it does that a lot. And so I have a little bit of white areas there, and so I'm just gonna kind of try to add a little bit of the ink back to the edges. But then I just throw that into my tub of water, and I'm going to add some spritz. And this is a newer product from Tim Holtz, and I'm using the colors Fossilized Amber and Picked Raspberry, and I'm just kind of spraying the spritz on. It will give it some shine, and it will also help me fill in some of the white area. Fossilized Amber is kind of all stuck. I probably haven't used it in a while. So it takes a while for it to loosen up so I can spray it. You can also remove the nozzle and just kind of splatter it from the nozzle on. So I'm just kind of spreading it around in some of the areas that were white, and then I'm going to dry it. A couple places have a little too much on it, so I just kind of tap it off, but I dry it really good. And then I have this Distress Microglaze, and I'm going to put that on top. And it's going to do a couple different things. One, since the pink was an oxide, it's going to kind of remove the chalkiness. But that's not the main reason I'm doing it. I don't mind the chalkiness. But I'm going to be adding some collage tissue paper on this from Tim Holtz, and so that means I'm going to be adding some collage medium, and I don't want the collage medium, because it's kind of a wet product, to smear my pattern of the distress ink that's down there. So I added the Distress Microglaze. You could also use Resist, and dry it, and then I'm just kind of buffing it right here just to make sure that it's nice and dry. And here is my collage paper I'm going to add, and it's from the botanical paper, and I chose it because it kind of goes along with the butterflies. And I'm using a water pen just to kind of pull the edges, because you don't want a straight cut line. If you have a straight cut line, you have a much greater chance of seeing that line in the final product. Whereas if you're pulling it apart and kind of have a ragged edge, you don't see it sometimes you can't tell at all, but you have to look close if you're going to see it. And I didn't want that big black whatever it said there, enclosure maybe. I don't remember what it said. I didn't want that on there, so I just kind of also went around that and pulled that little black label off of it. So here comes my collage medium, and that goes down first before my collage paper, and then it's just as smooth as I can. It's not a very big piece, so it's goes on pretty easily. And then I'll take the rest of that collage medium and go over it, help smooth it out a little more. And even though I dried that ink, I put the microglaze on it, still end up with a little bit of color in the leftover collage medium. And so I don't put any of that back in the tub, but I did spread a little bit of it on the rest of the piece just to kind of give it a little seal. And it's still a little wet, but I'm going to try to trim it anyways. And here, like I said, I come back and just give it a little bit of scorched timber to make it a little bit darker on the edge. I'm having a little bit of trouble with that blending sponge for the scorched timber. I don't know why, but it just never wants to stay on the blending tool. And it's not that old. I don't know what is up with that one. See, it's starting to come off. So I'm kind of careful with it. And so I'm going around the base as well with the scorched timber, and I'm also going to stamp the little tab on the base. And now I'm going to work on the larger circle. My sparkle texture paste has dried. So I'm adding some crackling campfire and just spreading it on with my blending tool. And at first I'm thinking, well, I can take the stencil, maybe kind of rub some of it off to give it some pattern, but the texture paste is keeping it off the bottom of the, so I'm like, oh yeah, that's not gonna work. So I do continue to take any orange that's sitting, the crackling campfire that's sitting on top of my pink sparkle texture, just so you can see the pink really coming through now. And I like that, but I think I wanted a little more something going on with that circle, so I did spray some. I'm kind of off camera there. My tripod must have slid a little bit. I added some fossilized amber of the spritz that I had out earlier, and just did a little pump of that and wiped that off the pink again. I'm adding a little bit of scorched, well actually this is, no, scorched timber, yeah. Scorched timber to the edges of the circle. And I'm going to take a little bit of the vintage photo. I think scorched timber would have just been a little too dark to spatter on top of that larger circle. I'm just trying to add a little bit of visual interest to that so it doesn't look pristine, because I want it to look like it's been around for a little while. And again, you want to, if you want a clear shot of the pink, once it's dry, which I'm drying right now, you want to wipe off that pink again to make sure the pink comes through. And I'm working on the ephemera and the focal point that's going to go on the larger circle. And it's another butterfly from the same file folder set. And I just kind of just add some vintage photo to the edges of all those pieces. And I'm gonna stamp one of the pieces, and I'm using the Field Notes stamp set from, I think, all these stamps. I'm gonna stamp it filed. And I'm gluing them all down. So I have my circles done. And the large one, I'm just going to glue straight onto the background. But the small one I am going to raise a little bit and give it a little dimension. And I have these dot stickers that are 3D, and I even use the spaces in between the dots and cut them apart and use them to elevate things. So that's kind of what you see there. It looks kind of odd, but hey, I don't know why you'd want to throw those away. You definitely can use those. And I've got some ephemera. This is from the number strips. And the butterfly, I think is from, I think it's called like paper strips. And it's just a bunch of different strips of designs and just tucking it underneath that larger circle. And I have a little open area there that I just don't like. So I'm going to grab another stamp from the stamp set and stamp it on top. And the last thing I'm doing, I should have done before I secured the large circle anyways, is punch a hole in the corner that's going to make this a ring, part of a ring journal. And so I kind of have to bend it back a little bit to get my hole punch. It's not exactly where I would normally want to punch it. It's a little off to the side a little bit, but that's okay. And so I stick my little grommet or eyelet and through, and I hammer it down with my tool, and that's it. It's done. I hope you enjoyed this one. It was a little longer than normal, I think, but I had fun doing it. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Give me a thumbs up and have a great day.